Welcome back to JB Reviews. You know, in 2023 when they redesigned the Super Duty, I still saw a lot of standard output power strokes. In 2024, it was probably more 50-50. And for 2025, most of the trucks that I've seen getting delivered do have the high output power stroke. Now, most people know by now, in order to know if the truck has a high output or standard output, high output has the red, standard output has the black for the 6.7 liter. For the longest time, Ram was the only HD truck that had two diesel options. Now, theirs did make a lot more sense because Ram had two transmissions. Now, if you wanted to get the standard output Cummins, that engine gave you the 68 RFE transmission. So you had less horsepower, less torque, because the 68 RFE could not handle the extra torque that the Eisen had. So when you got the high output, you did get a medium duty transmission. Ford, however, went about it a little different. Let's go ahead and pop the hood of this truck. So there it is. This is the high output power stroke. Now, one thing I love about this engine is the cooling. When it comes down to choosing an option, it depends on how you plan on using a truck. If you know you're gonna be towing daily, often, you don't necessarily buy this engine option for the horsepower and torque. You buy it for the cooling. And what I mean by that is, when it comes down to the turbocharger, they do cool that turbocharger with the high output. Now with the standard output, they do not. Most people, if you watch a lot of my videos, I've discussed the compression ratios. Ford did say that they lowered compression for the high output power stroke compared to the standard output power stroke. So in other words, this high output has 15.2 to 1 compared to the 15.8 to 1 compression on the standard output. Also, they did increase the displacement of the high pressure fuel pump for this high output. And apart from that, I mean, there's not many differences between the two engines. I think the turbocharger is obviously different. They probably raised the boost on the high output as well. That's probably how they're able to get the extra power out of this engine. But they both have the compacted graphite iron block, aluminum heads. I mean, there's really no differences between the two engines. Now, I do know that there are some differences in some of the intercooler piping here. I think, but yeah, it's not many differences. So in my humble opinion, I do believe that after 2025 or whenever they do a refresh on this truck, we're probably going to see just one diesel option again. And here's why I think that. When it comes down to speccing out these trucks, if you get the high output or standard output, both trucks are available with the 331 or the 355. Unless you're getting a trimmer package, you have to get the 355. But if you're just getting a regular Lariat, Platinum, whatever trim, if you get the diesel, you have the option to get a 331 or a 355, right? So when it comes down to options, Ford decided this year they're going to complicate their lineup. And they really did. Listen, they did. They complicated speccing out a Ford Super Duty, especially for the 3/4 tons, because if you're looking at a 3/4 ton truck with a gas engine, if you get a 7.3, unless you're getting a trimmer, you do have two transmission options with 7.3 now. And I'm serious when I say this, it's confusing. I really don't even like to talk about it because I have to go and look and research it because it's just so much. And again, you have 4 engine options now for XLT and Lariat, whereas back in 2023 and 24, you only had the 6.8 available for the XL and STX trucks. And now that Ram has gone down to just one diesel option, one axle ratio, one transmission down the line, whether you get 3/4 ton or 1 ton trucks, they have now probably the easiest truck to spec from the factory. See, in the past, if you got a 1 ton Ram, you had 2 diesel options and 1 gas engine. The gas engine had 2 axle ratios. And for the diesels, if you got a single rear wheel, you only got the 373. But GM does it the best. GM just gives you 1 diesel, 1 transmission, 1 axle ratio. Whether you get a dually or not, you're gonna get that 342 rear and the 1 high output Duramax, which they can say is high output because that's the only output they have. So with Ford, don't be surprised if next year they do get rid of the standard output Power Stroke. The point I'm about to make, this isn't something that Ford has announced. I'm just speculating personally because of what I've seen. As I said earlier in the video, I saw a lot of standard output Power Strokes in 2023. In 2024, it was probably about 50-50. This year, there's considerably more high output Power Strokes being delivered to the dealership compared to the standard output. Now, one thing I've mentioned in the past was I think a lot of people were on the fence about the high output because it was new, it was untested, and people were okay with getting the standard output because it has more than enough power and a truck is more than capable and is very bulletproof at this point. They did do some updates to that engine as well. They just don't talk about it, but they did do some updates that kind of mirror what they did on the high output. The only difference is this engine just has better cooling. So my prediction is in 2026, if they do a refresh on this truck next year, I could see the standard output Power Stroke going away. Now, I know some people are going to say, well, the standard output costs like, what is it, $2,000 less basically. I think it's $2,000 less. Ford could potentially lower the price of the high output engine because if you're not building two, even though they're very similar in construction and everything, there's still some differences there. They could consolidate it down to 1 diesel option, lower the price of the engine, even if it's, you know, $500 difference in price. I mean, the extra power, extra torque is definitely worth it in my opinion. And like I said, the cooling alone is worth it. I mean, you're definitely getting a better cooling system, especially for the turbocharger. And if you do tow heavy, if you do tow a lot up steep grades, that is a game changer. So I know Ford has speculated about a hybrid system. Most likely that would be a gas hybrid with electric motors, or motor I should say. And so if that does happen, that means Ford could have 5 different powertrains. So if they don't get rid of the standard output, maybe the 6.8 liter will become a hybrid alternative, which would be, actually that wouldn't make sense either because then the 7.3 would have less power, right? I don't know. I could see though them getting rid of an engine next year and it's going to be the standard output Power Stroke. If they refresh this truck and if they do decide to add a hybrid setup to this platform, I could see the standard output going away. It just makes sense. And I think that it would really make it easier for people to choose, because if you get a high output Power Stroke, you can still get to 331 versus 355. So even if you don't want that lower gearing, you don't have to get it with this engine. And the same thing goes with the standard output. So it really doesn't make sense for them to have 2 diesels. It doesn't make sense. I always thought that maybe they did it because they wanted to like kind of shove it to Ram a little bit, because you know Ram, the way they did it, it made more sense because the 68 RV wasn't that strong compared to the Eisen transmission. However, just something to consider. The 68 RV is for those guys who don't tow a lot, and I think that that was a better transmission to live with day to day. But for Ford, you get the same transmissions, you get the same rear ends. I mean, the only thing you're getting is just more horsepower and torque, and that's not a big deal in the grand scheme of things. Last thing to mention is this. Some people might complain about the extra cost of the high output, but you have to remember, Ram went down to 1 diesel for 2025, right? The cost of that engine is $12,595. Most guys are going to be a-okay with that. They're going to be more than happy to get the high output now in the 3/4 ton with that Powerline 8-speed ZF transmission. And I think for most people, I think Ford will definitely do the same thing, because it doesn't make sense for them to have 2 diesel options. They're very, very similar, very, very close. You get the same transmissions. It just makes sense, and it would really simplify the buying process, especially for guys who don't order trucks, right? If you want to get a truck off the lot and you want the high output, as you can see, most of these trucks today have the high output, why not just delete the standard output, simplify the engine options, and you can lower the price probably by not having 2 options on the market. So I hope this video was helpful. I think it makes sense for them to do it, and it wouldn't shock me if they did. As I said, this is just my opinion. I'm just predicting this because I don't know anyone at Ford, and I'm not that important, so I don't know anyone to talk to discuss this with, to see if this is something that they might do, but it just makes more sense. I think that GM is probably the easiest truck to buy off the lot. When it comes down to packaging, when it comes down to powertrains, they're the easiest. And one last thing to mention too is, with the trimmer, you can only get the high output. With the Platinum Plus, I believe you only can get the high output. So you already have 2 options already that you can't even get the standard output in. So why not just waterfall that down the line? See you guys soon.